The union of Aaron Spelling and Carolyn Jones stands as one of Hollywood's most fascinating partnerships. When they exchanged vows in 1953, Jones was the bigger name, and she had complete faith in Spelling's abilities. She strongly encouraged him to give up performing and concentrate on writing scripts. Their mutual dedication seemed unbreakable at first. Yet, as Spelling's fame grew, their ideal romance started to deteriorate. For many years, admirers wondered what had caused the rift between the famous producer and the cherished Addams Family actress. Shortly before his death, Spelling finally revealed the genuine reason for their separation. Did the very celebrity they chased together ruin their relationship, or did achievement merely push them away from each other? Long before Charlie's Angels, Dynasty, and Beverly Hills 90210 brought him worldwide recognition, and well ahead of his surprising divorce, Spelling's journey started far from Hollywood's glitter in Dallas, Texas. He came from a household shaped by hardship and endurance. His parents, David and Pearl Spelling, were Russian Jewish immigrants who arrived in America looking for better opportunities. His father earned a living as a tailor, slowly reconstructing existence one stitch at a time, and even altered the family surname from Sperling to Spelling. Still, the past remained nearby. Before this new chapter, his mother had already suffered the violent loss of her first spouse, Sam Seltzer, only 1 year prior to remarrying. Aaron was the youngest of 5 children, raised alongside older siblings who had witnessed more of life's challenges. 2 elder brothers, Sam and Daniel, plus 2 half-siblings, Max and Becky, filled the household with background, tales, and quiet pressures. Childhood proved difficult for Spelling. At merely 8 years old, an incident occurred that would remain with him permanently. Persistent anti-Semitic harassment at school did not simply wound his emotions. It impacted his physical health. The strain grew so overwhelming that he lost the ability to walk, a problem doctors eventually recognized as psychosomatic. For close to a year, he stayed bedridden, isolated from the outside world, forced to remain motionless while everything continued without him. Then, as abruptly as it arrived, the condition disappeared, and he healed completely. That time did not shape his identity, but it left an impression. It offered him moments to reflect, to dream, and to construct narratives inside his mind while his body rested. When he eventually rejoined society, he carried that silent strength forward. He later attended Forest Avenue High School in Dallas, merging back into a life that seemed average on the surface. However, something was already developing underneath, something that would eventually appear on screens everywhere. Then conflict arrived. During World War II, Spelling served in the United States Army Air Corps, not on battlefields, but in a position that nonetheless conveyed a narrative. He entertained troops aboard a ship, boosting morale during uncertain times, and functioned as a correspondent for Stars and Stripes, writing and noticing, already mastering the art of seizing moments and transforming them into relatable experiences. By 1949, he had graduated from Southern Methodist University. Even there, he avoided a conventional route. He was a cheerleader, an unusual detail that spoke volumes about his character. He understood performance, audience engagement, and how to inject energy into any space. Gradually and quietly, everything he had endured, his family background, personal difficulties, and the narratives he held, began to align, readying him for a future that nobody around him could yet envision. Before the Angels and the massive hits, Spelling accepted uncredited parts. His initial moves did not involve dazzling lights or major announcements. They happened softly, almost incidentally. In 1953, he appeared on screen for the first time, playing a minor character named Harry Williams in Vicky, a movie directed by Harry Horner. This was not a debut that drew attention, but it represented a beginning, and for Spelling, that sufficed to continue progressing. That same year, he entered television, securing roles in I Led 3 Lives and Dragnet, showing up in several episodes between 1953 and 1955. Work consistently arrived, one small part after another. By 1955, he appeared in an I Love Lucy episode called Tennessee Bound, briefly joining one of television's biggest programs. Shortly afterward, he featured in Alfred Hitchcock Presents and then Gunsmoke, portraying Weed Pendle in its first season. None of these performances made him famous. Most were fleeting appearances, occasionally uncredited. But collectively, they revealed a different narrative. By 1957, he had accumulated over 25 screen credits, quietly absorbing industry knowledge from within. He even resumed acting years later in 1963, and again in 1995 and 1998, each time without acknowledgement, like subtle nods to his origins. Between these moments, smaller events that might have been forgotten occurred. In 1954, he played a dog catcher in the debut episode of the CBS sitcom Willie, starring June Havoc. This was the sort of role most people would disregard. But for Spelling, each production environment, every spoken line, and each day contributed something valuable. He observed, learned, and remained attentive. Then, almost unexpectedly, the trajectory of his life shifted. In 1956, he marketed his first script, $20 Bride, to the Jane Wyman Show. This represented a quiet breakthrough, yet it held more significance than any acting job. Writing provided something that acting never fully delivered, the ability to influence the storyline rather than briefly stepping into it. This transition led him to 4-Star Television, where he worked on Zane Grey Theater between 1956 and 1961. Over time, he authored 20 episodes and produced numerous others, steadily gaining expertise. This phase marked the beginning of real progress. He was no longer merely learning. He was constructing something substantial. While still at 4-Star, he produced Burke's Law, the first project that genuinely benefited him. The program featured a rotating cast of guest stars, providing each episode with a novel sensation. This format would later reappear in shows like The Love Boat and Fantasy Island. What started as a concept slowly evolved into a trademark. By 1965, he felt prepared to advance further. He departed 4-Star and signed a 2-year contract with United Artists Television. This involved risk, but it offered something he had long pursued, an opportunity to lead. In April 1966, he teamed up with Danny Thomas to establish Thomas Spelling Productions, collaborating closely with ABC. Their debut show, Rango, failed to gain traction, but it opened doors. Another project, The Guns of Will Sonnet, followed. Although not every effort succeeded, momentum continued. That phase concluded in 1972, but Spelling persisted. He entered a fresh collaboration with Leonard Goldberg, creating Spelling Goldberg Productions. This time, everything succeeded. Beginning in the mid-1960s, programs emerged consecutively: The Mod Squad, The Rookies, Family, and then the titles that would define his legacy: Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island, The Love Boat Dynasty, and Beverly Hills 90210, which would later include his daughter Tori Spelling. Each show built upon the previous one, generating something larger than any single triumph. Mistakes occurred as well. In 1977, he produced The San Pedro Beach Bums, a short-lived sitcom, but by then, a single failure hardly mattered. The broader achievement was already established. Years afterward, his life story returned to the screen. In 2004, Dan Castellaneta portrayed him in Behind the Camera, the unauthorized story of Charlie's Angels, and Nicholas Hammond played him in Dynasty, the making of a guilty pleasure. By that time, the path from those modest, unnoticed roles to becoming one of television's most influential producers had already been recorded. In hindsight, it did not start with success. It started with small parts, brief scenes, and a man who kept advancing even when nobody was paying attention. Carolyn Jones was instrumental in shaping a mogul, effectively rescuing Aaron Spelling's career. They met during an uncertain and delicate period. Jones was still finding her footing in Hollywood, following her first screen role in The Turning Point from 1952, a part that echoed her real-life situation. She had spent years preparing for this journey, training at the Pasadena Playhouse after enrolling in 1947, and even undergoing nasal surgery in 1950 to meet industry appearance standards. Everything had been developing toward something, but nothing had yet settled. Then, as quickly as opportunities seemed to appear, they stopped. Paramount allowed her 6-month contract to lapse, leaving her career suspended in that quiet, uncertain space familiar to actors. In the midst of that pause, she met Aaron. The timing was unplanned but significant, because shortly afterward, her career revived with House of Wax in 1953, the same year she married Aaron in April. As that chapter closed, another opened for Jones. That same year, she assumed the role that would define her legacy, playing Morticia in The Addams Family. Over 2 seasons, she became the face of something audiences adored, even as the show ended prematurely despite its popularity. Afterward, work slowed. Parts grew harder to secure, and she took her career on the road, performing wherever possible. In 1968, she married her voice coach, Herbert Green, relocating with him to Palm Springs, moving somewhat further from Hollywood. But that distance was temporary. The pull of acting brought her back. By April 1977, that marriage ended as she returned to the industry, ready to restart. This time, she returned to television, appearing in programs like Wonder Woman, Roots, and even Fantasy Island, a series linked to Spelling's expanding empire. She later accepted a role on the soap opera Capital in 1982, playing Myrna Clegg, a character she retained even as her health deteriorated. In 1981, Jones received a diagnosis of colon cancer. She understood the implications but refused to stop. She continued working, continued showing up, even as her condition worsened. Amidst this, she married her longtime companion, Peter Bailey Britton, in September 1982, choosing to hold onto something stable as everything else became uncertain. She kept filming, even from a wheelchair, even experiencing pain, determined to persist as long as possible. While her story approached its final stages, Spelling's life had already taken another direction. After their divorce, he briefly dated Jill Hayworth, and later, in 1968, married Candy Spelling. With Candy, he created the family he and Jones once chose to avoid, welcoming daughter Tori Spelling in 1973 and son Randy Spelling in 1978. 2 lives that once moved alongside each other had diverged completely. One delved deeper into television power and influence. The other continued fighting for screen space, even when time was no longer favorable. Somewhere between, the story of their shared past remained quiet, incomplete, and still present beneath everything that followed. As Spelling built a career placing him at television center, attention did not always remain on his achievements. Over time, focus shifted toward controversies accompanying him into his later years, raising difficult questions. In 2005, a situation unfolded privately that would later become public. A nurse employed in his home, Charlene Richards, was first sued by Spelling and his wife Candy for allegedly violating a confidentiality agreement. But the matter did not end there. Richards countersued, claiming that during her employment, Spelling made unwanted advances and behaved inappropriately. She also alleged working unpaid overtime and never receiving proper tax documentation. The case proceeded to Superior Court, naming Spelling his wife and their trust, with allegations ranging from harassment and discrimination to wrongful termination. Richards sought damages, presenting her account. Conversely, Spelling's legal team pushed back forcefully. His attorney, Bert Fields, completely rejected the accusations, labeling them unfounded and insisting no truth existed behind them. He characterized the lawsuit as retaliation, arguing it emerged only after the Spellings had initiated legal action. In his words, anyone who truly knew Aaron Spelling would not believe the claims being made. For a while everything worked, but success did not last as she hoped. The show ended after 2 seasons, and although it continued through reruns, the role began defining her in ways that made forward movement difficult. She had been a film star before television, and she believed people would remember that. Still, the industry tended to narrow focus, and over time, roles diminished. Simultaneously, Spelling's life moved opposite. After their marriage ended, everything he had worked toward finally fell into place. He embraced his role as writer and producer and never looked back. One show led to another, building into a run including Charlie's Angels, Dynasty, The Love Boat, and more. Success that once felt distant became constant. This was a quiet reversal. The woman who carried them early on faded from spotlight, while the man she supported rose to heights few could reach. Within that contrast resided the truth about their marriage, not in a single moment, but in everything accumulated over time. Years later, When Spelling discussed that chapter, no bitterness appeared. If anything, understanding emerged. What they shared was real, but belonged to a time when both were trying to become something else. As their lives changed, so did their needs, and eventually, that gap became impossible to ignore. By the time Aaron Spelling died in June 2006, at age 83, after suffering a stroke at his Los Angeles home, his life story had already been written publicly. But the part he shared with Carolyn Jones remained different, quieter, more complex. Not a dramatic ending or sudden break, but simply two people who loved each other, stood together as long as possible, and then slowly walked separate directions, even as the feeling between them never completely vanished.